Well, good evening, WNBA and women's basketball fans, and welcome into the WNBA 365 Network, your new and improved 24/7 365 comprehensive home for everything revolving around the WNBA and the women's basketball universe on our relaunch show, coming away from the West Coast and the Midwest. Of course, Cal McClure joining you in studio here from Studio 171 in San Diego, joined by a trio of WNBA contributors to either websites or, of course, long-running friends of ours that we call our off-the-bench subs. Before we get to them, folks, real quick, let's quickly first welcome in the newest member of our WNBA family of correspondents, the contributor to today's Fast Break, Eric Nimchok, joining us all the way over in Elmhurst, Illinois. Eric, good early morning to you, man. How's everything going back there in the great state of Illinois, buddy?
It's just going great. Just finished off my caffeinated tea, so to ensure that I can keep going for this show, I am ready to talk some hoops.
And Eric, we of course appreciate you asking us during our brief off time to come help us out. Of course, folks, Eric is a writer for today's Fast Break. You can find out more by following him on Twitter at NimchokE on Twitter. And of course, our close pals, of course, just up the I-5 here in San Diego, up in Los Angeles. You know them, you love them so much. They are back full-time now as co-hosts Crystal Thomas and Tanisha Stewart, a.k.a. Shorty Mamba 24 on Twitter. Ladies, good evening. How's everything going up there in L.A.?
Hey.
Hey, you guys. I'm pretty good. Ready to get this fun started.
Of course, folks.
This
is just part of our...
Just hey. That's it.
That's all she's got. That's all she's got, Eric.
I'm a man of few words. I understand.
With that, though, folks, as you guys probably saw on Twitter, of course, this is only part of a major overhaul of rebranding for this network. We'll have more content for you folks with these four buffoons in this hangout, so expect a lot of laughs. So prepare yourself for a very fun and entertaining 30 minutes of WNBA coverage. With that, folks, we bring you folks some exclusive coverage of Game 5 of the WNBA Finals that wrapped up last night with the Minnesota Lynx capturing their third championship in 5 seasons over the Indiana Fever 69-52, what was at one point a pretty ugly game at Target Center last night. We'll start with our contributor in the hangout. We'll start with Eric over there in Illinois real quick. Now, Eric, obviously with you writing for today's Fast Break, you wrote a pretty good article about Maya Moore in the Western Conference specifically earlier on in the season before the playoffs had started. Eric, your overall thoughts, though, on the overall series. For the first time in a few years, we see a series go 5 games, go the distance to 5 games. But, Eric, what do you think, though, was the turning point here for the Lynx, turning it on at the right time to take Game 5 on their home floor in Minneapolis? What do you think and why, buddy?
Well, actually, I think the turning point came in Game 3 because that when Maya Moore hit that game-winning shot, which was obviously, I think, the backbreaker for Indiana, but it was anyone's series up until that point, but Indiana was not able to pull away when Maya Moore was on the bench in foul trouble. In fact, I think they actually gave up a bigger lead to Minnesota. And also, I think Cheryl Reeve just made a brilliant adjustment. She's been playing Maya at the 4 a lot, which kind of takes away what Indiana was doing against Sylvia Fowles defensively. When you have Maya at the 4, you can't really sit in the paint on Sylvia, and you got a lot of one-on-one with Orlando Larkins. And as we saw, she went to work. She shot almost 70% for the series, and yeah, I think that lineup change really turned the tide for the Lynx.
Crystal, going to you now. Of course, you've been here long enough on the network. You know how we operate in here, of course, with all of our guests. But Crystal, in your opinion, though, obviously, classic series. Indy, Minnesota goes the distance to 5 games. But Crystal, in your mind, Eric brought, though, even before the buzzer beater that Maya Moore hit at Bankers Life Fieldhouse in Game 3. What did you see, though, that may have given the Lynx an edge, though, in this championship series, and why?
I would have to agree. The Lynx, their bench just came out way better than Indiana did. Indiana, on certain games, kind of just gave up. You could see it in the game yesterday. There was a point where Indiana just pretty much felt like they didn't even want to be there anymore. Easy rebounds was going through their hands. There was a point where it was like no defense being played for 5 minutes. I think one of the things that for sure did it, though, was that game-winning shot Maya Moore hit. I just think that took their hearts out of them for that minute, and it showed in yesterday's game.
Shorty, Tanisha, whatever we're going to call you now, let's hang out over to you. Okay, so two of the three of us have brought up the buzzer beater that, of course, that by Maya Moore, pretty much vintage Michael Jordan style, how he beat the Cavaliers in the early 90s at the Gund Arena in heartbreaking fashion for the Cleveland Cavalier fans. It's pretty much similar style shot, of course, that breaks the hearts of the faithful at Bankers Life. But Shorty, maybe other than the buzzer beater, what other factors do you think gave Minnesota the championship this year, this season, and what do you think and why?
When it comes to this final series, I have to piggyback off what Eric said, and that is that Coach Cheryl Reeve just, with her championship experience already, she made adjustments, and she made adjustments at the right time in the series. The lineup change with Maya Moore at the 4, like he said. I mean, not to take anything away from not to take anything away from Steph White, because as a rookie coach, to make it that far, I mean, she did one hell of a job with the Fever roster. But it's just, like I said, with the championship experience of Coach Reeves, she knew how to make adjustments at the right time in the series. That's exactly what she did. And then in that pivotal Game 5, I mean, she just, man, she just brought all the right stuff. The team brought all the right stuff, and I mean, they took it all the way home. I mean, the turnovers in that game for Indy, it was atrocious, but moves, and they got the job done.
Okay, I know that everyone would hear, and I agree though about the back-breaking moment being the buzzer beater, of course, by Maya Moore at the buzzer, so on and so forth, silencing the crowd, the dagger to the hearts of the Indiana Fever. But I think though that not just the buzzer beater, guys. I think though, as we all kind of piggybacked on too, the coaching experience though too is what also, I believe, guided Minnesota to the promised land. Of course, Cheryl Reeve has been, through the gauntlet so many times as an assistant with the Shock in Detroit, and now, of course, with the Lynx winning their third title in 5 seasons. And again, folks, as we said, Minnesota over Indiana to close out the 2015 season, 69-52 from the Target Center. And also, I should mention too, the first time that the Lynx have won a championship in front of their home crowd, of course, winning on the road in 2011 and 2013. And perhaps we'll see them win again as it's kind of gone. Back on top in 2017, perhaps. We'll see what, of course, happens out of that. Eric, we'll go back over to you for this next one, of course. Talking about Maya Moore specifically, of course, her resume continues to impress anyone out there that wants to go for a new job. If you had that on your resume, 3 championships, all the athletes across college, high school, overseas play, of course. Eric, what does this 3rd championship in your mind do for Maya Moore's WNBA and overall, and actually her overall career legacy in your mind? I know she's not even close to retiring, but just how impressive this resume from high school top to bottom is at such a young age too, and right now in the prime of her career, blossoming in Minnesota. What do you think and why?
Maya Moore is unlike anything the women's game has ever seen. I mean, just to put it bluntly, I think she's it's true when you say that success follows her wherever she goes, and that's not a coincidence. Although she did have the luxury of getting drafted on a pretty good Lynx team already. Coming into the league, being groomed by Lindsay Whalen and Simone Augustus, being coached by Cheryl Reeve, that's a dream scenario for a rookie. But I think just when you talk about the will to win, you always talk about Tamika Catchings, obviously, which is part of what made this a great series. Maya's up there too as far as the intangibles go, and just her versus Catchings, just her will to win, her basketball IQ, her athleticism. There's really no weakness in her game, and just the ability for her to lift her team up and just to will her team to victory, just to make her teammates better. I know it's cliche, but when you're good at basketball, that's what you're going to do. You're going to make your teammates better no matter what. So I think we've just seen the beginning for Maya.
Crystal, what do you think? Of course, there was a stat sent out last night by someone with the Lynx or maybe even ESPN that Maya Moore has not lost like back-to-back championships or back-to-back games, I guess, in a playoff since high school, for heaven's sakes. And, of course, that resume, as I said, way more impressive than my 3 championships when I played baseball in 06 and 07 than working for a soccer team in 2013. Way better than mine. ever will be. So, Crystal, what does Maya Moore's resume, the championships, the winning home and abroad, do for her WNBA legacy, at such a young age, though, more importantly as well?
I mean, it does a lot, like you said. I mean, she's only 26, which is the scary thing about it. She's not even really in her prime of basketball yet. So imagine when she gets to like Tamika Catchings' age, and it's she's not slowing down anytime soon. And for her to have that accolade of never losing, since, like was never losing a back-to-back since high school, that's crazy. That's crazy to think about it. Like Eric said, she makes her team better, and she's so young. It's crazy. Maya Moore has plenty of years left in her. She's not slowing down anytime soon.
Shorty, obviously, we talk a lot about the championships, 2011, 13, now 15, of course. But, a lot of people forget, though, that Maya Moore, other than myself wearing UConn gear over here, forgets about that 90-game winning streak that she led the Huskies on during her career at UConn, of course, with Gino Ariema, of course, one of the greatest of all time coaching college hoops. So, Shorty, what is Maya Moore's resume at age 26, in your mind? What does that speak about her career so far at this young of an age? And she's not even well out of her prime at all. She's not even out of the woods yet in her prime. What do you think and why?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, like everyone's already stated so far, I mean, to accomplish so much so young, I mean, it's insane. I mean, we know, those titles that she had at UConn, but I honestly don't think anyone ever expected her to just come straight into the WNBA and do what she has done so far. I mean, like we already said, 3 titles already so far in her young career. And not only WNBA titles, let's bring in her Euro titles from China. Won 2 titles with her team in China, won finals MVP for one of those titles. And it's just, man, it's crazy. She everywhere she goes, she does win. And I mean, it's insane. But that just speaks to the level of her talent alone, her tenacity, her willingness to, push the envelope. And oh my goodness, we haven't seen the last of her. I mean, I could probably make a crazy prediction about 5 WNBA titles or more.
I've kind of sat here and listened to, the rest of the team kind of, just talk about Maya Moore and thinking about this. I don't think we've ever seen a player, probably in a long time, maybe never, where we've seen one particular player come out of college and live up to all of her hype. I mean, obviously, everything that Maya has done in her career, the 3 titles in the WNBA with the Lynx, of course, the 90-game win streak over at UConn, the national titles there with the Huskies, overseas in China winning countless titles over there. I mean, I really don't think that we've seen a college player specifically come out of college and simply take over the league. I mean, I'm sure that we had dubbed other players that way, either like Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi perhaps, but took Dee 3 years to win her first championship, where Maya won her rookie season in 2011. So, of course, we probably will never see a player physically take over a league. And I believe, though, that our friends at SwishPill.com had an article naming her the MDP, the most dominant player in the league, and I think that no one will come close anytime soon. But, Eric, on the other side of the spectrum, though, buddy, of course there is the legendary Tamika Catchings, who sadly will not get her ring this season, will have one final shot at winning ring number 2 in her final season in 2016, of course. That is highlighted by the Olympic break in June and July for the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil next year. Eric, there is no other player I can think of that I would say is the face of this league other than Tamika Catchings, what she has meant specifically to the league and to the Fever, the city of Indianapolis, and to that entire state almost basketball-wise, what she's meant to the league as a whole, as the WNBA Player Association president and rep for their union, all of her charitable work with her foundation, of course, as we know well, born with a hearing impairment that, of course, is hindered her at a young age. Eric, obviously, I know that probably a lot of people were rooting for Indiana, specifically for Catch to get her second championship in her illustrious career. Eric, in spite of her not winning, What would you say about Catch this season? How she basically took this team after a rough start, rookie head coach, where no one predicted them to get to the finals. Eric, what would you say about Catch's season this year, and why?
Well, first of all, I need to give amazing props to Steph White because, as you said, she's a rookie head coach. But what she did this season that was perhaps the most impressive, to me anyway, was she managed Tamika Catching's minutes so well. It was kind of like Greg Popovich with the Spurs. You know, she didn't sit any games out purposefully, but I think it was really important that she was fresh for the playoffs. You know, I saw firsthand she just totally dominated the sky as usual. Um, but yeah, again, when you talk about the will to win, she didn't really have eye-popping numbers statistically. In fact, I think statistically this is one of her worst seasons, if not her worst. But when Tamika Catchings is on the floor, once again, she makes her team better on both ends of the floor. It's really not even close, especially defensively. And I think she's making that transition from the leader, from the go-to player, to the aging veteran who can still bring it when she has to, but who knows when it's time to kind of give the reins to the other players, when it's time to concede, play as part of the new system under Steph White. And I think she's just done everything possible, to cement herself as one of the greatest ever.
Crystal, of course, Tamika Catchings, as I brought up in the open of this block segment here, of course, legendary player, of course, at Tennessee. With the Fever her whole career, staying there until her final year next year. And, of course, she's meant so much to not just that organization, that city, that state, but what she's meant to the game of women's pro basketball in general, for how she, always finds a way, as Eric said, finds a way to will her team to victory, of course. We saw firsthand, of course, a couple of games when of course, we all saw when the Fever played the Sparks or played the Sky of the season. And, of course, seeing firsthand, too, of how she basically put the team on her back and will them to the finish line to beat the Liberty on their home court to force Game 3 in the conference finals. Crystal, obviously a somber way to see her end the year, but what would you say about her entire season this year and why?
She's resilient. She never gave up. Like Eric said, Tamika Catchings, you could tell this year statistically wasn't great, but she never gave up. She willed her team in those moments. Even in Game 5, even though they lost, she never gave up in that game. Half of the other Fever players, you can see it in their face, their body language. Tamika Catchings never gave up, even when they were down by as much as they were. And that's one thing about Tamika Catchings that I love. And I think that's the part of the game that we'll miss. Is there's not a person who works as hard as she does out there, whether they're win or losing. I think that's what you can say about Tamika Catchings whole season. She worked hard, and it paid off. They got to the finals. They weren't supposed to be there, but I think that's how you can describe her season. It's just resilient and a hard worker and never giving up.
Shorty, obviously, I'll just say it again for the third time, but again, obviously, knowing how much Catch has meant to the league the league and to the Fever franchise, of course. Obviously, not the way you would like to have seen this kind of this storybook season go for the Fever. Of course, slow start, rookie head coach. Catch comes back, physically puts his team on her back, carries them all the way to the, to the finish line of the finals, but of course doesn't, get the big prize. What would you say about her 2015 season, in general, and why?
Oh my goodness! In my opinion, if this was the NCAAW, the Fever would have been my Cinderella team this year because, as already mentioned, they weren't supposed to be in the position that they were in. No one had them in the playoffs going past the Liberty, Big Bad Bill, No one saw them going that far, but oh my goodness, they defied the odds. And, they did everything that was supposed to be done, and that was all led by Catchings. Man, Catchings is a legend in her own right. Agreeing with everyone, may have not had the best statistical season this year, but it's her toughness, her willingness to never give up, and that's what stands her out, as one of the legends in the league, and she will as a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done, because her toughness and her willingness to never quit, got them that far into the finals.
Obviously, we've all piggybacked on everything that was said, of course. Tamika Catchings, of course, folks, legendary player, and I'm pretty sure that in a few years we'll be seeing her picture up on the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Mass. in a few years next to all the other greats like Lisa Leslie, who's already up there, and everyone else involved with women's basketball like Nancy Lieberman and Ann Myers-Drysdale. We'll see catch up there in about a few years, more than likely. But, Eric, we go from a memorable season on the court with the players to probably a pretty disappointing and dismal year with the people wearing gray and orange top jerseys. That would be the WNBA officiating crews, Eric, who probably had a season to forget, of course, notably held accountable for a very controversial ending to Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals between Minnesota and Phoenix. Of course, it ended in very controversial fashion on a call that I still do not think was on a foul that I believe still has not occurred at this point in time. Eric, obviously, I know that all four of us have seemed to have voiced our opinion in some capacity on social media about the officiating crews. Eric, obviously, man, I know that it was even worse in Phoenix because Renee Brown, the head of officiating, was in the arena when that call went down during the game between the Lynx and Mercury. So, of course, that had to hurt for her seeing that. Eric, how about your overall take on the officiating crews this overall season, and what has to be done to probably improve the refereeing and officiating for 2016 and beyond? Because I know that there's a few games and a few calls that I think we would all like to see reversed or changed from this past season. What do you think and why, bud?
Well, first of all, as a Sky fan, I will say that the officiating has been so bad that I will acknowledge that the basket by Elena Delle Donne should not have counted against the Atlanta Dream earlier this season. That's the first time I've ever seen that where a referee actually called a missed basket made. Like, I'm not sure how that even happens. But in all seriousness, I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle because I think the WNBA needs to invest more money in paying better officials. From what I hear, the officials in college are actually much highly paid compared to the WNBA officials. Other than that, though, I think they just need to take more accountability. Because after the call in Phoenix, they sent out the letter, the generic form response. Oh, well, we regret that the call happened, and yes, it should not have been called a foul. Well, that's great, but Phoenix is still eliminated, And I believe it was after Game 2 in the finals where Stephanie White says Catchings was being disrespected by the refs. Laurel Richie basically just told her to shut her trap. And that's not, like, the first step in solving a problem is admitting you have one. And I think Laurel Richie needs to just kind of acknowledge that, I mean, everyone can see that the officiating has been bad this season. Everybody, the fans, the players, the coaches, everyone can see that the officiating has been lousy, it's been crap, it's been unacceptable. So, as president of the WNBA, Richie just needs to realize that and say, okay, what can we do to make this better? We have the WNBA offseason is going to be what, 7 months, 8 months? They have plenty of time to work on this. So they really need to get around to it.
Crystal, obviously, I'm sure that all three of you guys and perhaps all you other viewers on watching us tonight here on our relaunch know that myself and former writer Pat Friday really voiced our opinion in a very stern manner before the rebrand happened about 2 weeks ago when we were on here that one night. And again, and as Eric brought up, though, again, Crystal, why does the WNBA, or really, why does any sport not really hold the accountability for their officials making some type of bad call? Now, I'm going to go off the board here real quick to a instance of a bad call last night in the baseball playoffs between Texas and Toronto, where he had a rule that was correctly called after a review for potential batter interference. They went to replay, and they got the call right. But, Crystal, in this instance, though, here with this call that we're still talking about from the playoffs earlier on, again, we're not here, folks, making excuses for the Mercury losing that Game 2 because they could have played a lot better in Game 1, perhaps. But, Crystal, like me and Pat said, though, why in this instance do the referees not put the whistle away, but instead they'll blow it again to do something like that in a magnified game between two big rivals, as I said back here 2 weeks ago, Crystal? What is your overall thought, though, on the state of the WNBA officiating and why and what needs to happen as well?
I think they need to put these refs do more training. I mean, it seems as if they're not training these refs enough. It seems as if they're kind of just like, we're just gonna leave it the way it is. It's working. Don't fix it. And to answer your question about the call, I just feel like it was laziness on their part. They were like, well, the game's almost over. You know, let's just call this and go home. Pretty much, it was it. I just feel like it was more so like, all right, this game's over anyway. We're trying not to outcome the game, change the outcome of the game. They probably changed the game anyway. So it's just, they could have easily went to the monitors. They do it any other time. They do it when somebody, knocks the ball out. Why couldn't they do it at a critical call like that? I just feel like it was laziness, and of course not going to take accountability for it, because what happened is what they're afraid of. Making the wrong call. But to kind of write a letter just to go, oh, my bad, we made a mistake. I just feel like that was wrong. I feel like if they would have taken the chance to at least review the play, even if the play would have looked the same, at least review the play and, to try to at least fix it a little bit, because the officiating just was horrible.
Shorty, obviously, still some, angry feelings towards the league and the officiating crew from everyone, Merc fan, Lynx fan, or not, about how this game ended. Of course, I remember seeing a lot of the Lynx fans, Rashad and Ben and Corey and Kirby, who were almost somber about how this game ended, because they even felt as fans that was not the proper way to end a game of that magnitude. So, Shorty, in your mind, as you kind of think about, what happened, and probably even calls early in the year, of course, the one that I'm still upset about is how the referees will tee up catch and then suspend her for a game, which she clearly did not make any type of contact with an official during that instance earlier in the season. Shorty, what has to happen for the officiating to kind of get back up to par for next season, and why?
Well, when it comes to the officiating crew, I definitely agree that better training needs to take place. And as far as the Phoenix game goes, it's like, what were they doing? I thought it was well stated that under the WNBA guidelines that all calls are reviewable under the 2-minute mark. So why they didn't follow that rule and review that play, I'm not sure, and we will never know the reason to that. But again, it was just pure laziness on their part. They didn't do their job, and of course the WNBA gave that generic, published that generic letter out, just trying to save face. They didn't want to admit that, personnel and their officiating crew, made a mistake. But as a league and as a brand, the fans knew that they made a mistake. So, they're, oh my goodness, they could step up and pretty much state that, okay, they made a mistake, and just move on from there and try to do the right thing the next time around.
Even now, and again, everyone knows I'm not, I was not rooting for either team in that series, but, with my job, of course, I was watching the game to see what was going on, and, I was kind of expecting some kind of piss-poor excuse or some type of statement from the league in the following days when they actually took the time to go back and review the play, not worried about going to the tilted kill outside the arena after the game was over. They could have spent 5 more minutes playing an overtime period, not worried about food or going to Casino Arizona after that game ended in Phoenix. But I still don't get, why can we not hold these officials accountable and bring them to a press conference like we've seen with Jim Joyce in baseball, Don Dinkinger in baseball. We've seen other officials come out in other sports. Even the NBA, they've come out and admitted some type of wrongdoing, whether it's Tim Donaghy when he was doing point shaving or he was arrested and put in jail for that. And we've seen baseball umpires, too, that have blown perfect games or blown World Series games come out and say, look, I screwed up the call. This is what get their perspective on why they made this call. And for the WNBA to not do this and to leave the fans and players and the teams involved left out to dry, I just don't see why. And of course, guys, I was really sad and disappointed too for Misty Bass for Phoenix, who was affected by this call because her better half, Shane Boyd, was screwed out of a Arena Football League Division Championship playing for Arizona against San Jose on the same type of a missed call by an officiating crew that cost him a chance to go back and win, his fourth straight AFL Bowl championship in the Arena Football League. So obviously that's not a good sign either. And I think next year either recertify the referees or do something to appease them to make some better calls, because when you suspend the face of the league, when you suspend Tamika Catchings, you have a major problem on your hands as a league. That is what absolutely cannot happen. Something has to change sometime next season. All right, team, one more topic before we get out of here for the night, and we will reconvene on Monday night. We'll start previewing and start recapping and talking about some of the team's seasons. We'll start off with the number one pick for the lottery this year, the Seattle Storm. Obviously, Eric, a new coach coming in this year with Jenny Busek, moved up from her role as an assistant coach last year under former coach Brian Agler. New coach, new players, sadly, same result, bottom half of the conference. Number one pick once more for Seattle. More likely will be Brianna Stewart out of UConn, of course, last year drafting both Jewel Lloyd and also drafting KML 1 and 3 overall. Eric, in your mind, man, obviously, I know that you wrote a great story about an unsung hero, Alicia Clark, for the Storm earlier in the season. Eric, in your mind, though, man, when you saw the Storm team play, man, it was almost like, yes, new coach and some new faces, but, kind of like the same results. Eric, what did you see go wrong for Seattle in this year? Obviously, we know about Sue Bird and her age and a very young team up and coming, but what, though, in your mind, just did not do this for Seattle year one post-Agler? What do you think and why, buddy?
Well, I think there are a lot of possible answers to that question. You had an extremely young roster, an extremely young core. Jewel Lloyd, KML obviously didn't get a lot of playing time, most likely because of her conditioning, and she wasn't really up to WNBA game speed. Although I think Jenny Busek actually did a pretty good job in her first year, because her responsibility was to develop the talent. It wasn't to, make the playoffs at any possible cost, because, under Brian Agler, that's what they would do. Even after, Lauren Jackson was having the surgeries, Sue Bird was declining, he would do whatever it takes to, make the playoffs, get the fourth seed, and then, get eliminated in the first round. So I think, obviously, they just weren't as talented as the rest of the West, I don't think. They certainly didn't have as much size. But I think I don't want to say it was tanking, because it wasn't, but I think it was kind of by design that they weren't going all in, playing their veterans heavy minutes. I think it was more important in the big picture to get the rookies, Lloyd, KML, Tokashki especially. I just think it was pretty important to get them to bring them along as opposed to just making the playoffs.
Yeah, Eric, I agree with you, man, about, of course, Jenny Busek, her first year, of course. Now, I know that she got a bad rep, though, for how she wrecked the Monarchs in their championship run in 2005. Later in the season, of course, how she treated Rebecca Brunson and Kara Lawson, a little bit about that. But, Crystal, in your mind, though, obviously, okay, you're set for the future, of course, with Lloyd, Mosqueda Lewis, and then eventually perhaps Stewart in 2000 in the draft lottery for next year. But, Crystal, okay, obviously we know that they own Los Angeles this season. But other than that, though, it was like a different team from time to time. What did you think went wrong for Seattle this year, and why?
I mean, like Eric said, just longer, like I said, Sue Bird, Lauren Jackson has been there since I don't know how long, so getting pretty much ready to gear for the future, and I think they're also gearing up with the future without Sue Bird, because realistically, I don't think she has that many years left. So I think they're trying to get used to what it's like without Sue Bird and trying to build the young cast. Like you said, in a couple of years, you have to might be, it doesn't right. They're in the water for a little bit.
Shorty, obviously, we know that, right now, Sue Bird, not ready to really call it quits yet, but I think, though, she's got maybe 2 years left before she'll probably say enough's enough, no mas, perhaps. And, of course, now that the Storm are trying to kind of gear themselves for the future, of course, Lloyd and Mosqueda Lewis last year, more than likely will be Brianna Stewart this year in the draft lottery, of course, going to Seattle next year. Shorty, in your mind though, what did you see though with this Storm team though that you said to yourself, this team is not ready yet for playoff basketball, and why?
Youth, plain and simple. A lot of young players. Was brought in this year. Also, a brand new coach. So, I mean, it was just a learning year for them, and they did that by design to piggyback off what Eric said. They knew that coming into this year, they were not going to contend, so they just wanted to use this year as a learning experience, for the rookie talent that was going to come in. But I think even next year it'll continue to be a learning experience. Will they get better? Will they be better? Of course. Any team with a top level talent like Brianna Stewart most definitely is, going to be up there soon in contention. But for right now, it's still going to be a learning experience for the roster as a whole. Even next year, I'm not even going to fully say whether they would be in playoff contention or not, because just like I said, so many things going on with Sue Bird declining. We really don't know what's going to eventually happen with LJ, in her future with the team. I do know that next year she will, play in the Olympics with the Opals, so we don't know what's going to go on beyond 2016 for her. But just like I said, youth, and hopefully they'll build on in the years to come and make themselves a contender.
Again, folks, the Seattle Storm winning the 2016 draft lottery, of course, as we know it, they had shuffled up the procedures in the lottery format, but of course the Storm, though, with the number one pick for this year, or for next year's 2016 WNBA draft lottery. With that, though, folks, we are glad to be back, rebranded, and back in more in a better state of mind, of course. And as we should mention, folks, with our new Twitter handle at WNBA365, we should mention the Storm president and GM of the team followed us this morning before the show tonight. So obviously, making our rounds, folks, with of course, as you probably know, of course, with our new Twitter handle, getting some more and more WNBA people involved here, and of course, it's what it's all about. And we should mention, though, too, folks, that we will be having a fifth member of our team joining us on Monday. We're going to give a quick shout out to one of our viewers as well. Reagan Patrick will be joining us on Monday, coming up on Monday night. With that, though, folks, on a great opening tip-off of the new network, we thank you, folks, so much for joining us this evening for the past 37 minutes and change. Until Monday night, folks, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Good night now. This has been the WNBA 365 Network. We are the WNBA, and we are here, of course, for everything WNBA and women's basketball. For Eric Nemchuk over in Illinois, and, of course, everyone out here on the West Coast. For Crystal Thomas and Shorty Mamba 24 up in L.A., yours truly, Cal McClurg and San Diego signing off. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday night. Bye-bye. That was good job.